Howdy, everybody. What's going on? It's Robert Phoenix broadcasting to you live from Texas. Hey, I'm a little late tonight, and I apologize. So I'm going to hang out here for a while and just wait for people to kind of show up. The reason I'm late is because I've been working on a garden project, which has been kind of time consuming. Like when I get into something, I really get into something. So I had to stave off the little critters. And I built a, how do I say it? Like a shelter for the plants. Hey, Judy. No. I am definitely doing it. I got a late start tonight because I had to do a few other things. And I was working on the garden stuff. So that's why I'm running a little late. Let's see who else comes in here tonight and decides to hang out. So how are you doing, Judy? Is life good? Well, we got one person. Maybe we'll get a few more. That would be awesome. Be totally awesome. Yeah, the bamboo thing. So I had to create a door. So what I did is, we had these raised beds, and the animals were eating the raised beds. So that wasn't really cool, right? And there's a bunch of bamboo that was like hanging out in this backyard. So I decided to cut it and then make a kind of a framed sort of structure with some garden mesh and kind of take care of business today and yesterday. The cowboy hat. I'm wearing the cowboy hats. I was told that hats are kind of cool on YouTube. That's what I heard. I got some marketing info, but I am kind of wearing just a plain old white t-shirt tonight. Yeah, you're on. So yeah, I'm on. I apologize for being a bit late, but I was like I said, I was telling Judy that I was working on garden project, and I sometimes when I get into things, I get really obsessed with them. So I couldn't just like make a protective kind of structure for the plants. I had to build a door and everything. How did you find such long bamboo? Well, it was growing in this backyard where we have the garden, and it was proliferating. I love bamboo. Scorpio rising. Yeah, when I get into it, man, I totally get into it. Now I'm trying this other thing. So I got some bamboo cuttings, and I've got them in water. I'm going to see if they actually will actually begin to create roots in the water. And if that's the case, I might grow my own bamboo, although, it's so invasive. I know it will take over. Well, I cut a bunch of it up. So I think who's ever the bamboo doesn't belong to anybody, really. It's a very odd piece of property. There's like an aqueduct separating one property and the other on one side of this fence. There's just like a ton of bamboo. So I just went in there and I got it, snatched it up. Probably won't see Jasper tonight because I'm not sitting down. I'm actually standing up tonight. But he's over there. Should I bring him on just so you can say hi? Let me bring him on. Hold on one second. There he is. Hi, Jasper. Say hello, everybody. Yeah. Okay. Here's your Jasper fix for the night. Hey, so we're going to be talking about Anthony Bourdain. And we're going to be talking about his chart. So if you go to my website, robertphoenix.com, I just uploaded Anthony Bourdain's rectified chart because there's no time associated with Anthony Bourdain. So we'll do a little bit of rectification, not eyebrow gate. Oh, no. Oh, yeah. Who had the fake eyebrow? The eyebrow that fell off? Who was that? Who had the fake eyebrow? I can't keep up with everything. I have to pick and choose my my salacious astrology gossip. Trudeau. Oh, yeah, Justin Trudeau. Or was it Macron? Was it Macron or Trudeau? Which one was it? There's Joe. Hey, Joe. What's going on? Howdy. Hey, so we're going to talk about Bourdain tonight. And you go to my website, robertphoenix.com, and I have 3 charts that are up there. Yeah, it's Trudeau. Hello. Raven Rain. What a name, huh? Raven Rain. It's like a rock star name. Raven Rain. What happened to the chat? The chat just went away. Where did chat go? There we go. Trudeau, and you should read Mike Huckabee's Twitter post about it. Mike Huckabee's actually really funny. A lot of people think he's just like a hardcore Christian. That guy's actually got a really good sense of humor. Let me clear my glasses up. So, of course, the big news of the weekend is Anthony Bourdain, and there's another celebrity that died. It was an actor from a series called The Goldbergs, 20-year-old kid. I think his name is Owen something. So we had 3 celebrity deaths in the past week. The Kate Spade stuff just keeps getting weirder and weirder with Andy Spade walking around with that mask from the rescuers and the bloody scarf. And I mean, we are in some really crazy ass times. Are we not? Totally crazy. Man. Was Owen a soup? We don't know. Don't know. Was Bourdain a Owen Dorrell? Hit and run. Yeah. Hit and run in D.C., Washington, D.C. So there we go. There's 3, since things tend to come in 3. But we're going to focus on Bourdain tonight. I'm just going to wait for a few more people to come on in here and kind of fill the chat or fill the experience. Once again, you can go to my website, robertphoenix.com, and you'll be able to look at the charts for tonight. We're going to be looking at Anthony Bourdain's natal chart, which I rectified. We're going to be looking at Asia Argento's chart in conjunction with Bourdain, the Synastry, and we're also going to be looking at the death chart of Anthony Bourdain as well. And when you get into the whole Bourdain thing, things get really, really murky. But we're going to try to look at this from the astrological perspective tonight. And I may editorialize a little bit, but FB pic of a tweet from Bourdain, suppose he posted it. Yeah, so, okay, let's get into this. Why don't we just kind of jump into Bourdain, because we're slowly kind of rising here in terms of numbers, and people will catch up. So let's do this. I want to get into his chart, and then we're going to play around with a bunch of other stuff. So if you go to my website, the Anthony Bourdain chart is it's the last chart of the 3. So what I have posted is I have the Bourdain death, Bourdain and Asia Argento, and then Bourdain himself. So why don't we start with the Bourdain chart, which I'm going to get into right now. So one of the things that Anthony Bourdain does not have is a birth time as it relates to the internet and his natal chart. So just like we did last week with Tommy Robinson, I decided to get in there and try to rectify Bourdain's chart. So one of the things that Bourdain, okay, so when we look at the ascendant, one of the things that we're trying to do is we're trying to understand kind of how a person looks, how they present themselves, and kind of the overall characteristics on a day-to-day level that are accentuated and for lack of a better term, activated. Okay. So when I looked at his chart, I was trying to find some kind of like physical significance for Anthony Bourdain. One of the things that really jumped out at me is he has he had a horse face, a really long face. Okay. And he was tall. Anthony Bourdain was 6 feet 4 inches. It's pretty tall. And that really fits in alignment with Sagittarius on the ascendant, because Sagittarians tend to be quite tall, and they actually have a very kind of equine looking sort of structure and physiognomy. And clearly Bourdain has kind of no disrespect to the dead, but he had kind of a horsey face. Okay. So I said, okay, I'll start off with Sag on the ascendant. And when I put Sag on the ascendant, it made so much sense, because not only would he have Sagittarius rising, but he would also have the North Node / True Node in the first house in Sagittarius. And then when you look at the chart, there's Jupiter and Pluto in the 9th house, both in the sign of Leo. And the 9th house represents foreign countries and the great big wide world. And it also represents publishing. Okay, so keep that in mind as we move through this. So I looked at this and said, okay, Anthony Bourdain, he cut his teeth. He made an impact when he wrote and Kitchen Confidential was published. And that's a real Jupiter-Pluto kind of 9th house experience, right? It's like publishing, Leo, in the world, money. And then, of course, what happened after that? Well, he went on a worldwide tour, which has been going on for roughly like the last 20 years. Started off in the Food Network, and then it went to the Travel Channel, which is where he did all of his no reservation shows. And then once no reservations ended, he got signed to CNN, and he did another show, which was all about, again, travel, more politics, more food. So when we see all that travel, that's really like commensurate with Sagittarius on the ascendant and the True Node in Sagittarius in the first house. So he was out 250 days out of the year, according to his second wife, Otia. And she's a really interesting woman in a lot of ways. So Bourdain was always engaged in this kind of like daily movement with the True Node in the first house, Sag rising. He's got the equine kind of facial exterior. He's got the long body. It fits. Now, by degree, it depends. If I moved it a few degrees forward, what's Eileen say? What does she say? Just want to see what she says here. She says, "Oh, hi, Eileen. You're late." Just kidding. If I move it a few degrees forward, so if I change the time, Saturn gets closer to the ascendant, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because not only is he kind of equine looking, but he's also a little craggy, which that Saturn close to the ascendant can actually, kind of bring to the physiognomy of the individual. But I decided I wanted to keep Saturn in the 12th house, because you really never know much about Anthony Bourdain's father. I mean, I had followed Bourdain for a very long time, and he rarely, if ever, talked about his father. A little bit about his mother, but not at all about his father. So that really fits like a Saturn 12th house kind of assignation for the father. So I'm looking at like, okay, this makes sense. This makes a lot of sense. We've got Sag rising roughly about 5 degrees with that True Node right there, very close to the ascendant, about 2 degrees off the ascendant. Somebody that travels 250 days out of the year. Okay, so now I think we have, at the very least, my estimation of a foundation and the starter for the chart. Okay, after I rectified it. So it's 610, like New York time. I am late because I talk too much. I don't know if I was really hoping. Yes, we're going to talk about the chart. Okay. So let me like go into some of the just like straight up astrological kinds of pieces around this chart. If his true node is in the first house, that means his south node is in the seventh house. And and I think the true node in the first house in Sagittarius is great if you're on the road and you're doing a travel show and you're talking about food and meeting people from all these different countries, and you've got Jupiter and Pluto in the ninth house. I mean, it all kind of works, right? Where it doesn't work is relationship, because that's where his south node is, and that's in Gemini, and it would be in the seventh house. So one of the things that, like when I work with people and I talk about somebody who has a true node in the first house, what I say is like, relationship isn't necessarily kryptonite, but you have to put your own interests first with the true node in the first house. And that's just the way it is. Which means that the relationship would be secondary and almost tertiary in some ways. And I don't care what sign the node is in. If the node is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's Virgo first house. It doesn't matter if it's true node in Libra first house. It doesn't matter. Well, it does with Libra. I take that back. Let's go any other sign but Libra. It matters, okay? Because you're dealing with this objective in life. And the objective in life with the true node, that is the tip of the spear, right? That is the tip of the spear. The other day I was giving a reading to somebody, and I had a steak knife next to me, and I was talking about the true node. And I picked up the steak knife and I said, "You see this part of the knife? That's what you cut the meat with." Okay, and if you're a vegetarian, you've got to cut something. So whatever that is, you wouldn't use a steak knife, but you know what I'm talking about. So, and then I flipped the knife around and I said, "Would you cut the meat from this side of the knife?" Of course not. That's the south node. Okay, does that make sense? You don't cut meat with the backside of the knife unless it's a double-edged sword. In which case, well, you're probably a freaking meat master. All right, so this is the importance of the true node. It is the tip of the spear. It is the sharp edge of the knife, and that is the razor's edge of your life in this lifetime. So that said, if you have the true node in the first house and you're actualizing, which is what you should be doing with true node in the first house, and you're actualizing, there are two, well, you can still be in a relationship, but the relationship has to take a back seat to what you're doing. I'm sorry, it's just the way it is. Just like if you flip the poles and you have the true node in the seventh house, you have the south node in the first house, your identity takes a back seat to relationship and the people that you're working with, because that's where the opportunity is. So here we have in Bourdain's chart, true node in Sagittarius in the first house, south node in Gemini in the second house. So he was living his chart. He was doing, in my estimation, what he was supposed to do. The problem or the mistake that he made was in relationship. That's the mistake. Anthony Bourdain chose the wrong relationships. And with Asia Argento, he probably chose one of the most wrong relationships that he could have had at this point in time in his life. We'll get into that. The perfect person for Anthony Bourdain in terms of relationship would have been somebody who would either stay at home dutifully and keep the home fires burning, right? He comes back. He was gone 250 days out of the year, which is why Octavia Bourdain ultimately divorced him, because he wasn't around. He'd be around in the holidays, and that's about it, right? So the type of person that Bourdain could have been with and it would have made some sense with. Oh, hi, Liz. Yeah, I got the Texas thing going. I got the star back here. You see that? It's like the star of Texas right back there. And I got some Jimi Hendrix going on back there. I love Jimi Hendrix. So he needed somebody to stay at home, or he needed somebody that he could travel with, right? This would have been ideal. So if he could have had like a partner that he was doing the shows with, that he was involved with, that would have made a much better use of his chart, because he could have accentuated the true node in Sagittarius and done his thing, and it would have been just fine if he had that person along with him. And there's no, at that point, there's no, it's kind of like the gypsy life, the gypsy lifestyle, right? And somebody who can do that, but he didn't. And he made, I think really bad relationship choices. And even his second to last with Octavia, whom he met, by the way, while he was doing his show. And I remember watching her in Sardinia. I think she's Italian. And it was a very odd kind of like you could tell that there was some chemistry there, but she was also kind of into like belittling him a little bit. It's very odd to watch, which to me, and again, this may sound perhaps not the most enlightened, but Anthony Bourdain was, in my estimation, kind of a beta male. Some people say, "Well, that's great. He's a beta male. There's nothing wrong with that." But I think he was conflicted. I think he wanted to be his own person and do his own thing, and there was a sacrifice, and that sacrifice became, well, I think ultimately his death. So when you have South Node in the 7th house in Gemini, what are you dealing with? You're dealing with kind of the kryptonite of relationships. If you put the relationship first, you're going to suffer. So he wound up, losing his marriage because he continued to do his show. I mean, I think that's living his chart in a lot of ways. But what he did then after that is he got back into another relationship. So why did Anthony Bourdain do that? Well, I want you to look at his Sun-Venus conjunction, okay? And I want to talk a little bit about the Sun-Venus conjunction. And the Sun-Venus conjunction generally represents, where did my chat go? Lost my chat again. Come on, chat, come on back. Where's my chat? Am I blanking out? You can tell here that I don't have the strongest stream quality. Okay, it's coming back a little bit. There we go. Pop the chat out. It's better that way. How about the rumors he was suicided? TPTB. Coming out against TPTB. I think there are a lot of rumors. I think there are a lot of reasons why Bourdain. I don't think Bourdain killed himself, by the way. Yeah, I don't think Bourdain killed himself. I don't think he did. He had an 11-year-old daughter, and I think he had something to live for. He was also going to China, and he was going to. And by the way, I don't think Anthony Bourdain is a hero either. I don't think he's I don't think he's a truth-telling hero martyr. I think what happened with Anthony Bourdain is he got involved with Asia Argento, and he got very close to things, and I think it changed him in a way that made him dangerous and unpredictable. If you look at, if you go back in time and you look at people that have supposedly died by, he was an a-hole. Yeah, Anthony Bourdain was not a cool guy. I mean, he came off as being cool, but he was not really a cool guy. I mean, he was kind of a dick, actually. And I really liked No Reservations, but he was kind of a dick. And one of the things, again, this is just my own personal experience of watching his show, but one of the things that I did not like about him was that he treated the flyover people with disdain. To that extent, he kind of had this smug, elitist asshole vibe. I'm sorry, but he did, and I never really liked that, And I was not a huge Paula Deen fan, but he certainly spared her no mercy whatsoever. So we'll get into his character a little bit. But what I wanted to talk about was his relationship, kind of status and energy, okay? And this gets into, look, I live in Flyover. I love these people. I went to church today. I don't normally go to church, but I went there to support Kimberly today. She was getting some kind of a very important piece of her life. So I went there to support her, and I went to church today, flat with her. It's fine. It's totally fine. Although I disagreed. I can't shut my mind off with these people. The guy gave a nice sermon, but he talked about the Pharisees. He talked about Jesus and the Pharisees. And he said, well, Jesus was really hard on the Pharisees. And like, damn right he was hard on them because, they were Satanists. That's why he was hard on the Pharisees. And then the ministers, like, well, they were just practicing a religion. They were just practicing a religion. Like, no, they weren't just practicing any old religion. It was a religion that was involving like animal sacrifice, child sacrifice. They wrote the Talmud coming out of that. And out of the Talmud, there's like the eternal blaspheming of Jesus and Mary boiling in pots of excrement for eternity. And you want to like give those people a pass? That's why Christianity is in such a bad shape today. A little aside. That was my one little issue with church today. Like I said, normally I don't go to church. So let's get into the Sun-Venus conjunction. Okay, because of the proximity of Venus, it's almost always going to be around the sun. Yeah, they're all about the same. The Talmud and the Quran are very, very similar. Sharia law and Noahide law are very similar. Gee, you wonder why? Question mark. Okay. So if you look at the sun and Venus, Venus is always going to be kind of around the sun because it's close to the sun. Venus and Mercury are going to be, either in the same sign, the sign before, or the sign after. It's very rare where we have like one of those planets that are like two signs away. And if it is, it had to do with the retrograde, right? So people that have Venus-Sun conjunctions need relationships. They need relationships. Part of who they are is being worked out through relationship. And you say, well, that's a lot of people because of the proximity to Venus and the sun. Well, that's true because there are a lot of relationships in the world, right? I mean, this is the world that's built on relationship. So, of course, we'd have, a lot of people doing that with the Venus-Sun conjunction. So when you see Venus-Sun in a chart, it means that that person is tied into a relationship in some way, okay? Now, follow me here with this. If the sun, as in Bourdain's case, is here ahead of Venus, that means Venus or the person that he's involved with theoretically would be supporting his identity. Okay, do you understand that? If Venus is ahead of the sun, that means that the individual is supporting the identity of the relationship. So in this case, we have Bourdain, whose sun is at 4 degrees Cancer, and I have it right there at the edge of the 8th house, has Venus at 28 degrees Gemini retrograde. So they are conjunct. It's kind of a wide conjunction, but conjunct nonetheless. And Venus is going backwards. So one of the things that I thought was interesting about this, and again, it made sense when I looked at the rectification, because he's got Neptune in the 11th house. And that's the house of the internet. It's the house of the Aquarian age. It's the house of friends. In Bourdain, whether he was able to fake it or actually really demonstrate it, he could go somewhere and kind of be friends with anybody, right? Like he could be friends with that crazy guy from Russia that he went to the castle with in Transylvania. Or he could be friends with Eric Ripert, another chef. He could be friends with just about anyone with Neptune in the 11th house. wide variety. He could hang out with Obama on a plastic stool in a restaurant in Hanoi, eating noodles and cold beer, or he could hang out with Ted Nugent on his land, not far from me here in Texas, shooting game. He could that's the nature of Neptune in the 11th house. And then the trine to the sun and the trine to Venus gives him the ability to go one-on-one with people and kind of get in and have the conversation. Like this part of his chart actually works. This Neptune trine to the sun and Neptune trine to Venus. The Venus retrograde, however, to me is kind of akin to being involved with somebody and then walking it back, or that person being involved with him and then walking it back. It is not like Venus direct or Venus, conjunct. What is the sign in the Bourdain astrology charts that has my boy who just got testicle to bounce around farmlands for hours? What is the sign in the Bourdain charts that has my boy who just got testicle implants to bounce around the farmlands for hours? Yeah, I don't know, man. That's above my pay grade. That's really above my pay grade. I think that there may be like another. Maybe you should go to a psychic that's doing a live stream. They could actually answer your question. How does that sound? Does that sound about right? Because I can't answer that. It's above my pay grade. Okay, so and Venus in Gemini represents like two kinds of, how do I say this? Two kinds of energies, two kinds of potentialities, right? But it's going backwards. It's walking backwards. And there's some kind of like dissatisfaction here because Cancer is very emotional and engaged and nurturing and bonding. And Venus in Gemini doesn't have the same kind of energy. It's more about kind of experience, more about kind of what can happen. It's restless, it's restless, it's eclectic, and it's not necessarily working together with that Cancerian. They're kind of they're very different energies. But he cannot get away from a relationship because of the Venus-Sun conjunction. And then we have the South Node in Gemini in the 7th house, right? So on the one hand, he's drawn to relationship, and he's drawn towards some other kind of potentiality with the relationship. And then on the other hand, he's not supposed to be in a relationship at all, or at least not a typical relationship. Does that make sense? Are you guys following that? You tracking that? What's interesting here is the input of the father and the mother, because of the in conjunct with Saturn and the in conjunct with the moon. Okay? So you have Saturn, which is the father, hidden in the 12th house, and the moon, which is the mother. And we have the in conjunct going between both of them all the way up to the sun, right? And the in conjunct is probably closer to Venus here. Interesting, very interesting. So I think if we're looking at kind of a code for Bourdain and relationship, it would have to do with the father. If you're looking at a code for Bourdain as an individual and what made him, it would be the mother. And it's the invisible path between the two. Okay. He has Saturn in the 12th house. And one of the things that Saturn in the 12th house can really trigger in people is a sense that they are never, ever really a part of the world. That there is kind of an eternal loneliness in some ways with Saturn in the 12th house. There's just like a quest for meaning in life that can't always be fulfilled. And there are people like Bourdain, who obviously was very successful and quite social with Saturn. With his career. If everyone has, it's a very difficult position. But at the end of the day, Saturn in the 12th house is generally considered kind of one of the more spiritual aspects of the chart, meaning that there is an intense focus on the inner life with Saturn in the 12th. and really kind of a quest for answers around the meaning of life, because people just don't fit in a lot of ways with Saturn in the 12th. So it's not necessarily a bad position for Saturn. If you're looking at the long-term potential for Saturn, it can actually be quite profound, to be quite honest with you. He had an unusual mother, Moon conjunct Chiron, and even with his wife, Octavia, who had a daughter, right? They had a daughter together. She became an unusual mother. She basically got into MMA, became an MMA head. So now she's an MMA fighter. I would say that that's fairly unusual, wouldn't you? The interesting thing about this chart as well is that Bourdain's sun is ingressing into the 8th house, which is a hidden aspect of Anthony Bourdain. Some of the comments that I've come across, or some of the information I've come across with Bourdain, in as much as he was not the nicest person in the world. And he had probably gotten in over his head with Asia Argento, but he was also potentially a spy. And that actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it, right? Because he would have the perfect cover for being a spy. He had a television show, took him all over the world, correct? He could find out things, he could talk to people, heads of state, your connections all over the planet. It was the perfect cover. And when I look at like signs that are really, I think, kind of like really good for spy work, it's always Scorpio and Gemini. And yeah, I think, Bourdain, okay, in typical Gemini fashion, let's look at his Mercury. Scorpio and Gemini are the two Sag signs. Scorpio because they can keep secrets, and Gemini because they can have multiple identities, right? So if you look at what Bourdain was up to over the last couple months, he was like dogging Donald Trump. He was saying that he would poison Trump. He said that. You know, if he was asked, what would you feed Trump and Kim? He said, oh, that's easy, hemlock. But then he was also dogging Hillary Clinton. He was going after her at the same time. So you had a guy who wasn't pulling any punches against both sides. It's very Gemini-like, don't you think? And look what's going on with Mercury and Mars in his chart. He's got a Mercury-Mars square, which means he would piss people off. And Neptune has been around his Mars for roughly the last year and a half, which means he had a Neptune-Mercury square as well. Anthony Bourdain got into trouble because he was mouthing off, he was pissing people off, and ultimately he knew most likely too much. And the too much came from Asia Argento. If you look at Bourdain's chart, he also has a Neptune square to the moon, which when we get into those like Neptune squares, again, you know, it's like, it's where we deceive ourselves. It's where we have deception in our charts. So he was deceptive around his emotional motivations much of the time of the Neptune moon square. And by the way, the moon, I've talked about this before, the moon in Aquarius is not your typical moon. Yeah, I've seen Asia Argento's Instagram photos. All you got to do is check them out. Asia Argento is the daughter of Dario Argento. By the way, Argento is Italian for the word silver. And silver is the devil's currency. But if you don't know that, right? Judas got 40 pieces of silver to turn Christ in. So in Satanism, like silver is like it's the metal, it's the color. So she's got that embedded in her last name. Suspiria director, that's right. And she's in Suspiria. She plays a young witch in Suspiria. And in fact, Asia Argento is more than likely what's called a red witch. Right? There are white witches, black witches, and red witches. She's more than likely a red witch. And the red witch is where we get the lipstick, right? It's where we get the lipstick ritual. Yeah, she's a red witch. Red witches are into blood sacrifice, hence the color red, right? Blood. So, when the whole lipstick ritual with the red lips, supposedly, that's supposed to mirror blood, right? Blood. The blood that you would take on with bloody red lips, right? That's the red lipstick ritual. Just remember that. Next time you put lipstick on, there's a reason why red is such a vivacious color. Tono KU says Rosicrucian. So yeah, check out her Instagram. Asia Argento was in on the game in a big way. Has been in on it for a long time, and likely initiated through her father and through the number of movies that she did. She's actually doing a movie now where apparently she's reenacting the rape scene with Harvey Weinstein. And she was done with Anthony. She was totally done with Bourdain. She was done, right? She was running around. There were pictures of her and her old boyfriend. They're looking snugly. Here you have a guy with the sun in Cancer. You think Cancerian people have an easy time letting go? Maybe a bit easier Venus retrograde Gemini, but not that easy. And boom, yeah, she was done with him. Totally done with him. Absolutely. And he's got that moon astrology. He's got that moon in Aquarius, which is unusual. It's an unusual moon. It's a voyeuristic moon. It likes to watch. And I can tell you right now, Anthony Bourdain was a big time voyeur. You can just see it in his chart with the moon and the Chiron conjunction and the opposition to Uranus in Leo in the 8th house. So there's a lot going on here with this chart. And that Neptune square to Mercury is very murky, very, very murky. And I'm assuming that he was dealing with secrets because Jupiter, again, based on this chart, had been in his 12th house. It's retrograde. It's about ready to go forward, but Jupiter had been in his 12th house for, since it had really it's been his 12th house for a while. And it's going to go back to, let's see, where's Jupiter? It's going to go back to 13 degrees, so one more degree. So it's been in his 12th house for months now, and that's expanding the dark nature of the 12th house. In Scorpio, correct? So he was seeing things. Like he was becoming privy to things, and most likely through Asia Argento. But here's Bourdain's challenge. Bourdain's challenge ultimately is relationship. This is a person who I don't believe really should have been in the kind of relationships that he was involved with. It's kind of a downfall for him, to be quite honest with you. Okay, the chat's gone away. All right, so here's what I want to do now. I want to go to the other chart, which is the chart with he and Argento. This is going to be the Synastry charts. This one is really interesting. Okay, so if we're back in the chat room here, and you've gone to my website, check out the Synastry chart. So in this chart, you'll see that Bourdain is on the inside, and Argento is on the outside. And immediately, what I'm drawn to is Neptune on his ascendant. And when somebody's Neptune is like on an ascendant inside of a Synastry chart, it is really hard for that individual to clearly see who they are, where they're going. Their identity has become obfuscated by the vagaries of the Neptunian experience, which are, we got a bad stream again tonight. I'm gonna have to go hardwired next time. Where's my chat? My chat folks, oh, there they are. There you are. Yeah, CNN is a coven of witches. Certainly feels like that, doesn't it? I mean, the whole witch thing is like, there was a tweet from Amber Tamblyn this week, and she was basically calling on, all her fellow witches to send as much love and light to Asia Argento as possible. And she's basically saying that she's a witch. She's calling on all these other witches to, like, spell cast and protect Asia Argento. It's one of the maybe not so secret secrets in Hollywood with young women. Rose McGowan also likely a witch, by the way. And this is the really weird thing about Me Too. You've got these Me Too women who are speaking out, and a lot of them have very kinds of MK Ultra, occult, kind of esoteric programming. It's really odd in some ways, right? Like it's almost as if they're running cover, And I don't doubt, like, the pain that Rose McGowan she doesn't look like a happy person. I mean, she looks like a person who is kind of at the edge of her rope. So I don't think that I certainly wouldn't want to be her. And I think that, there's, probably some compassion involved here. But on the other hand, it also appears that the number of key people in the hashtag Me Too movement might have some really direct connections to things like MK Ultra programming and also occult relationships. Just keep that in mind. So Neptune is on his ascendant. He couldn't see himself. Her Neptune is right on his ascendant. He's totally confused. And he was in a state of, I don't know, man. He had an 11-year-old girl. I'm sorry. Here comes Robert coming through. He had an 11-year-old girl, and he's off running around, with Asia Argento, and like he's protecting her. What about I don't know. His MMA wife probably do a better job, protecting his daughter. But theoretically, isn't that where Anthony Bourdain should be? Shouldn't he be with his 11-year-old daughter, like raising her? He's 61 years old. He could be Asia Argento's father. And look, I'm not necessarily judging the age thing, but he's got an 11-year-old girl, and he went off on this kind of here it comes. He went off on a narcissistic journey, pursuing something that was very Neptunian, something that was kind of mystical and cloudy and has like incredible kinds of like ecstasy associated with it, but also Neptune will take you right down into the gutter and beyond, right? It has the potential of lifting you up to the altitudes of the mind of God, heaven, and, this kind of oneness. And he really was like merging with Asia Argento through Neptune, but he lost himself. Anthony Bourdain lost himself, and you can see it in this chart, okay? Totally lost himself. There's other things going on in the chart as well. He has his Mars in Pisces, correct? What's Mars doing here? It's squaring Neptune. What happens when you get into Mars-Neptune squares? Neptune drains Mars. It drains Mars. Just takes all that Mars energy, sucks it right out. Right out. So what was she doing with Anthony Bourdain? Sucking him right out with that Neptune-Mars square. There it is. It's right there. I'm sorry. Could be anybody. Right? But that's the nature of it. It's the nature of Neptune-Mars squares. In the Synastry chart, you don't want them. You don't want them. If you have Mars and somebody's Neptune is squaring your Mars, like you could be a total husk by the time that relationship is over. Sorry, it's the way it is. It's the way it is. Her true node is conjunct his Saturn. That's kind of karmic, right? It's in Scorpio. It's dark. It's hidden. He's actually playing the role of a father for her. Like if we're looking at this from a past life relationship, Anthony Bourdain was her father in a past life. Yeah. I wonder what he did with her in a past life? Question mark. His Venus, her Venus is in Leo. Look where it is. It's conjunct his Pluto. That's obsession. He was obsessed over this woman. He had Jupiter, Pluto, and Leo, and Venus. Her Venus was conjunct his Pluto. Total obsession. Total. You know, he was like this. He was head over heels, beyond head over heels. But what is her Venus doing? Squaring his Saturn. At some point, age would become an issue, and it did. It was too old for her. She was into him for a while, but you have the Venus Saturn square, and look, Venus Saturn squares aren't bad. You know, they did a study on Synastry charts, and couples over long periods of time, and for the longest time, they thought that Venus Saturn squares were really bad in a relationship. But they found out through this long-term Synastry program that the couples that were the most successful were the ones that had Venus Saturn squares, believe it or not. It's true. So this could have been something long-term, but it wasn't. Like, I think age became an issue with that Venus Saturn square, but totally obsessed. His Jupiter, his Pluto, wham, right on her Venus. There are some other things going on here. Look at where her moon is. Her moon is right at his IC. That's super, super powerful, right? Moon on the IC. She was born on a full moon, by the way. Can you see that in her chart? She's a full moon child with moon in Pisces. You know, she's magical. And it's right on his IC. So what does that mean? That means like almost like a maternal role, right? Her moon is on his IC. I think that there were times where if you probably had, I don't know, a video cam with her and him, that you could see him regress in some ways with her moon on his IC. He could also feel quite at home with her, by the way, with moon on the IC. That's another version of it, because the moon does represent home, correct? Now the moon here is in square with Mr. Bourdain's Venus. So we have a moon-Venus square, moon-sun square, more squares, kind of abounding in this chart. Her Jupiter and her Chiron in Aries in his fifth house, children, but also inflamed with love, right? That's passion. Jupiter in the fifth house, Chiron there, Jupiter trine. I would imagine that at certain points in the relationship, they probably had banging sex with the Jupiter trine Pluto, Venus conjunct Pluto. Okay. Her Mars is in Gemini, interestingly enough, and it is in his seventh house based on the rectified chart. And that is anger and violence to some degree. People that have Mars in Gemini tend to be kinky. It's true. Gemini is a kinky sign. Moon in Gemini, Mars in Gemini, kind of kinky. And there's that Venus-Mars, kind of a wide conjunction. These two people were into stuff together. You know, they were not white bread at all. This was not a white bread couple. His Venus and Sun obviously squared her Sun in Virgo, and she has her Sun in the 12th house, and she has Pluto right on her ascendant. That's very powerful with Pluto on the ascendant. And it generally connotates some connection with either very deep personal power or at times even a very strong connection to the occult with Pluto on the ascendant, okay? So this is kind of a rough summation of their charts, but here's what I really want you to look at. This is where things get like totally like spicy inside of this chart. Okay, so Bourdain has Uranus at 0 Scorpio. Okay, 0 Scorpio. Asia Argento has, I take that back. Bourdain has Uranus at 0 Leo, and Argento has Uranus at 0 Scorpio. So they had square Uranus, right, in their chart, 0 degrees. And where's Taurus been? Uranus has been in Taurus. I'm sorry, where's Uranus? Uranus has been in Taurus at 1 degree. So we have a T-square with all 3 Uranuses. And at this point, Uranus would have been, excuse me, in Argento's descendant. So that would have been basically her 7th house of relationship. Excuse me. And for Tony Bourdain, transiting Uranus would have been in his, let's see, fifth house, romance. T-square, Uranian T-square. What happens when you get transiting Uranus, T-squaring off against one person's natal Uranus and the other person's natal Uranus? I think we just saw it. I think we just saw an example of that. It's sudden, it's swift, potentially explosive, very intense. I think this is like we're trying to find some kind of kind of signature here. It's Uranus square, Uranus square, Uranus square. The only thing that we didn't see here is we have the Uranus opposition. I take that back. Uranus opposition, and then square Uranus with Bourdain's. That's highly unusual. Highly. And for Bourdain, Uranus is in the 8th house, which is the house of death, sex, and transformation. So not only is there this intense, fixed Uranian T-square going on, but there's Argento Saturn in the 8th house. This whole thing is very, very, very creepy, very bizarre, and it feels like for Anthony, to be honest with you. I think he got in over his head. I think her Saturn took him into a very, very deep place, a very, very deep place, and a dark place. And I think Bourdain was privy to a lot of the material that Asia Argento and perhaps Rose McGowan and some others have been speaking out against and kind of broadcasting. I think Anthony Bourdain knew what was going on. And I think that he was getting perhaps a little too mouthy. He was getting a little too mouthy with Hillary Clinton, might have gotten a little too mouthy with Donald Trump. And I think that became an issue. And if you look at these deaths in these hotel rooms, right, with suicide, we had, recently we had, I think it was a hotel room, right? It was Chris Cornell. And I think it was in Detroit. Chester Bennington. But really the two that I'm thinking about are Michael Hutchins and David Carradine, who both died with being hanged. And in both incidents, like one of the things that Carradine supposedly was going to do, I heard this, I can't really pin it on anything, but I'd heard that Carradine was another guy who had a lot of information and was going to go public. And his brother, Keith, I think kind of knew that. And he went to, I think he died in Indonesia or Thailand to investigate. And then you didn't hear anything. And then Michael Hutchins had been involved with a really contentious case against Bob Geldof, right? And what did he do? He hanged himself in his hotel room. So we have Geldof, we have Carradine, and now we have Bourdain. And there's some theme. Now, I don't know if Robin Williams hanged himself. Some people, I think Robin Williams is a different bucket, different category. I wouldn't put him in this category necessarily. But something happened here with Bourdain, and I don't think Anthony Bourdain hanged himself. I don't. I think he knew too much, and I think that has a bit of a sacrificial quality associated with it. That's my 2 cents. I just lost 10 people. Let's go into the chart of the death chart. Let's go check that out. It's the same chart. Hold on. Did that one. Okay, here we go. Oh boy, that's not it. Hold on. Where is it? Here it is. Okay. So, who knows? It was sunrise, and it was in Strasbourg. So I was just trying to make heads or tails of this thing. in terms of where certain planets were for him. We already talked about Uranus and the Uranus square that was going on. And Uranus was that time in the second house. We could, and we could, move the sort of the time around a bit to maybe come up with some other potentiality here. But what I'm looking at and seeing is the Neptune square to Venus. That there is like an untold story around this with relationship with the Neptune square, because Venus was in Cancer at that time and was in his 8th house, right around 1 a.m. again, which would have meant a secret or a relationship that was cloaked and occulted in the 8th house. And there's that square to Neptune. There's something about the relationship, the Neptune square, where it is not making sense. Okay, there's a hidden story here with relationship with the Neptune square. The moon at that time was in Aries, moon conjunct Chiron, so it was squaring Bourdain's sun in Cancer, which happens, right? It happens. You'll have a moon square sun once a month, basically. These other aspects wouldn't be happening like the Uranus happen. So now the moon square to the sun becomes much more intense, and it has a bit more of a story to tell. And it's in the IC, or in the 4th house, and that's not far off from where we saw Asia Argento's moon, right, in the Synastry chart. Mars here is an interesting player because it's conjunct Bourdain's moon, and Mars can be violent even in the sign of Aquarius, and it's squaring Uranus here. We know about the Uranus square; it's been going on, but again, it's right on his moon. Now that's violence. That's violence. Mars moon conjunction square Uranus, hanging out in his second house. It's not really doing a whole lot there. He also has got the Saturn Sun opposition going on. It's a big opposition. It's a test. When you go through Saturn Sun opposition, you're dealing with a test. Test of your identity, test of your character. You're tested against the world with a Saturn Sun opposition. He was going through a test of sorts. And also perhaps getting ready to align or strike out against. Look, I don't know. I don't know if Anthony Bourdain was going to spill the beans. I don't know if he was going to jump on Trump's side like Alex Jones purports it to be. But I can tell you right now, he was in over his head. He had been initiated into something. He knew things. He was still trying to kind of be the agent provocateur. He's also somebody who I think probably had connections with being a spy, which is, what I becomes dangerous. If you know too much, you're dangerous. You're a liability. And I think Anthony Bourdain probably became a liability. That's my sense. But if you look at his chart again, I keep going back to the fact that he made a terrible mistake being with Asia Argento, and he didn't make a great choice either with being with his previous wife, even though he had a daughter that came out of it. I think this is a man who was plagued by making bad choices with the South Node in Gemini, when he really should have just been a kind of a gypsy with the true node in Sag in the 1st house. That true node in Sagittarius can come off as being a bit, in the 1st house, being a bit pompous in some ways. It's all about the truth. Like, I know the truth, and this is the truth. That's how it can come down in a lot of ways. But again, there's a lot happening here. A lot. I think the most telling aspects are between he and Argento with that T-square, that fixed T-square with Uranus in play, and that Neptune on his ascendant. He got lost. He got lost inside of a world that he did not ultimately know how to navigate. And I think he did have some moral compunctions and to sort those out. But I also feel like he was somebody who was very compromised in a lot of ways. Not just currently, but I think there's pieces of his past where he was compromised as well. And so when you move forward, you want to do the good thing, walk the right path, and you're compromised in the past. It can be a little bit difficult. And I think he's got some of that. Okay, why don't we go into the chat room here? Let's see what's going on. Anthony was a sophisticated drinker, sophisticated hangers. Yes, he got over his head. You don't work exactly. Fascinating analysis. Did he mention this is part of Bourdain's like this is the enigmatic part of Bourdain. Wait, why is the date 3rd, 11th when he died on the 8th? No, it says the 8th.
You gotta put your glasses on. Put them so you can read the chart.
No, so it's the 8th. It's the 8th. Weird. I see 11th. No. Strange. It says sidereal time, 11:30. Right there, Anthony Bourdain, June 25th, Friday, June 8th. I don't know what you're. After he left his wife, he never really. It's true, but his wife, I have to say, like, I'm gonna get in trouble here, but like I watched, I was a very avid viewer of No Reservations, and I watched his wife cuckold him. Like even during the courtship phase, when he's in Sardinia and you see him with her, she's like totally cuckolding him. Like he picked the wrong person. He picked a really intense, hardcore, martial arts mama. And I don't think that he was really well suited for her, unless of course he wanted to play a supportive role, which, there's nothing wrong with that. But I think it was bad. I think it was the wrong choice. And then he went off, with Asia Argento, and he went into kind of this dark archetypal Alice in Wonderland kind of experience. And she took him down the rabbit hole. And I don't think, I think he saw stuff and was part of stuff. And I think he might have been part of that stuff maybe at some point even earlier on, but I think he went darker, much darker. Yes, Bourdain was interesting on some level because he didn't stand for what was going on in Palestine. He was like anti-Palestine. He was anti-aggression towards Israel. He was Jewish, right? Anthony Bourdain was Jewish. His mother was Jewish. So he's, kind of going off against Israel and not digging Palestine. But at the same time, he's also somebody who was not really all that friendly towards the white race, and basically said, the best thing that could happen is doesn't exist anymore. At some point, we'll all be gone. He didn't allow anybody who was Caucasian, Anglo-Saxon in his events. Bourdain was like that. He was very contradictory in a lot of ways. So on the one hand, he could be, really kind of socially just, and on the other hand, he's, playing a Barbara Lerner Spectre card. So he's a generational cipher. 4 years my senior, and I think it's really important to kind of look at a lot of what's happening with these passings with a much clearer, I don't want to say jaundiced view, but I think we need to see these things in a way that is a more kind of comprehensive and 360, whether it's the Tommy Robinson event or whether it's the Roseanne Barr event or the Kate Spade thing, which I haven't even begun to unpack. And then Bourdain, there's a lot happening. I've come to a new conclusion about Roseanne Barr. I really think that Roseanne Barr needs help, real help. I think I came to a point of empathy with Roseanne Barr. I think that woman's really, really fucked up, and that she could use some real serious help. Not from a psychiatrist either, right? Do you feel something big is going to happen in July? Let me think. Well, here's where I think the big piece is going to happen. It's when Uranus goes stationary and is square Mars. I think that is what we're looking at. There's the eclipse, yes. But I think it's this Uranus stationary square Mars thing. Because it's the first time that Uranus goes retrograde. And it's that stationary movement, squaring Mars, which at that time will actually be retrograde itself. So, yeah, the eclipse will be a big deal. We talked about that. Regina and I talked about that eclipse. Is that eclipse in Leo? Well, let's get into our little eclipse info here, since you're asking about it. By the way, I've got like 1,700 words already on the Bourdain stuff that I'm writing for the website, which should be out soon. Give me a second here. Where is it? Okay, I'm going to go. Just going to go into Astro. Okay, so we're going to go. Just with the eclipse stuff, I want to be really, really exact. I don't want to, especially when I'm doing it live, I can't go back and edit it. So you guys will, at the very least, appreciate my Virgoan exactitude, correct? Okay. So, right. So the next eclipse we have is on the 13th, and that is a partial solar eclipse in Cancer. That's July 13th. Now that eclipse is going to take place right around what, 23 degrees. Let me get the ephemeris out. One sec. We'll get into this. By the time I do this for the fourth time, I'll have all the eclipse stuff down. Okay. So July 13th, that's Friday the 13th. I'm not crazy about that day. And I'm not superstitious either. Yeah. Okay. So that eclipse is going to be at 20 degrees. It's kind of getting into opposition with the US Pluto, which is, I think, at what, 26? So it's kind of getting into that opposition with the US Pluto in the second house of the United States chart. And we're dealing with, of course, Cancer. And Cancer moon, it'll be the new moon. That's going to be right around 20 degrees. And I don't think it's going to be impacting anything in Bourdain's charts. Let me just think about this for a second. Well, Pluto is going to be in square here. It's going to be almost an exact square with Pluto. That's kind of a big deal, actually. And Pluto's retrograde. What does that look like? Let's go into this. There's something about this event coming up here on that eclipse. And the eclipse energy takes place about a week before and a week after, right? And the energy I get from it is shocking. It's like shocking energy. And it has to do with like something we can't avert our eyes from, but we desperately want to. And it feels very much connected to this whole process around birth and children in some ways. There's something about this event, this eclipse, that demands our attention, but we don't want it. And we can't look the other way. That's the energy I get from it. I get shocking. I get shocking. I get some, it's like, yeah, it's, you know, like we look for like signature kinds of events, right? And one of the things that sort of have been leading up to this kind of like cyclotron of energy in some ways. There's a lot of the stuff around children and the True Node and Leo and what's going on with a lot of the, you know, quote unquote pedophile stuff. And but there's something about this that is connected to, because it's almost like a presage. And, the true node is going to be going into Cancer after it moves through Leo at the end of the year. And this feels very much like kind of an indication of what we're going to be experiencing, like roughly for the next almost year and 7 months, almost 2 years with that true node transit. And it has to do with births. It has to do with aborted births. That's what it feels like to me. There's something around this that is shocking, this energy. And I think we're at a point in time where having something shock us would be quite difficult in some ways. Although not necessarily out of the question, for sure. So you asked me for my kind of insight into it. I think we're dealing with kind of a shock factor. And it might be, again, we're dealing with Friday the 13th. It might be the death of somebody that was just like totally unexpected, but like, highly unusual. Highly, like, I wouldn't say it would happen. It'd be something like Melania Trump or something like that. It's like a mother. It feels very, it's like dark maternal, but shocking. That's my take on it. We're also going to be going through kind of the death throes with money. I hate to say it, but it's true. And we'll probably have a very different discussion about money in the next year to 2 years. So that's coming. That discussion is definitely coming. I don't think it's quite here yet with that eclipse. But I'm telling you, the one area you want to watch out for is this Uranus station, which is in the first part of August. And Uranus station's at 2:33, and it's there for 5 days, and it starts on August 1st. And Mars is retrograde in Aquarius at 2 degrees, right? And so we've got this very kind of stationary retrograde thing going with Mars squaring Uranus. And again, that's more kind of, shock energy because we're dealing with both Mars and we're dealing with, that to me feels like, that's like a major data breach. That's like anything that's happened with, Google or Facebook will be like mice nuts with this Mars Uranus square. Major data breach, like people, all over the planet kind of at risk with like their identity, their information. That it kind of feels like that on one level. But I see that week starting in August 1st as being a very turbulent time because not only that, but we get into that it's kind of a weird sort of soft, T square in some ways, like because the sun will be at 8 degrees Leo and Jupiter will be at 14 Scorpio. So Uranus and Mars will be kind of behind them, but we're talking about 4 major planets, all fixed sign during that time. I think the first week of August is a game changer. It's a game changer. Whether it's going to happen with Trump, the administration, it's kind of that first week, I think, is like I think we're going to have a conversation after that first week that's going to be like, I want to say it's like before and after, but it's going to have that feeling. We're going to have this feeling like what the hell just happened, and kind of where are we now? So keep that in mind. I hate to be kind of a doom guy, but look, we're dealing with fixed squares here, and then that Uranus stationary, and it's stationary for basically what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days at 2 degrees 33. And squaring off against that Mars. And then a kind of tilted, sort of wide, fixed T square. So, good times to be alive, huh? Really good times to be alive. I should probably spend a little more time looking at that eclipse, maybe get into some really predictive stuff. But it's in like Cancerian territory, so it's kind of United Statesy, but it's past the United States sun. All right, let's see where we are in terms of the chat room. What's going on with my chatters? Aliens can relate to Trump. Yeah, they totally can. Absolutely. The alien part of me relates to Trump too. Trump up, nukes down, CGI, alien could be, you're honest. Can the queen die if she is undead? I don't think the queen's ever going to die. I think she's around. I think her and Henry Kissinger will outlive all of us. What else do we have here? Nuke can devastate the world. Keep them. Yes, absolutely. Well, the nuke can devastate the world. I don't think they want to devastate the world. I don't think they want to devastate. Look, if I was ruling this world, I wouldn't want it devastated. I think the nuclear bomb is like old news. You know, Israel can flip the switch on Talpiot and shut everything down. It's much better than a nuke. They can shut down power grids. They shut down computer systems. They can shut down ATMs. Way more powerful than a nuke. Everything gets to stand, right? I wonder if sometimes we deal with power outages. Yeah, okay. What else do we have here? Not really. She's up in age unless she is killed. I would be shocked if she does die. Yeah. Scientists saying solar activity connected to anxiety, depression, and rest. Absolutely. Absolutely. Eclipse in third decam, Pluto, death of some illusions, occulting, projections, communications. Yes, you are using decans right. Absolutely. Yes. And yeah, we are connected to the sun. The sun represents our consciousness. Cliff High. Do you think Cliff High believes in God? Just a question. Not that he has to. Cliff High is always good. He's always good. Cliff High always has answers, doesn't he? Like he's always got an answer. Like, you know, one of these days I'd love Cliff High to say, you know, I really don't know. I don't know. That's, you know, I haven't figured that one out yet. He's always got something though, right? My thoughts on Jay Weidner. That's a complicated. I love Raw. Raw's my man. Coach! What's happening? Say hi to Coach. Coach Kair. Coach Kair is my good friend down in the South. Here's Ra. Big love to my man, Kair. Good to see you, man. Good to see you. Jay Weidner. Let me just answer the Jay Weidner question. Jay Weidner, good friend. Let's just say I don't know. I don't want to get into Jay too much because I have some. I've had some interactions with Jay, which have not been entirely positive, and I'd like to you know, keep them pretty positive. I love Jay's wife, Sharon. She's a good lady, and I think Jay has been trying his best to stay the course. Let's put it that way. Okay, let's put it that way. That's all I'll say. That's it. And I think his work with Kubrick is great. I love his Kubrick stuff. And I'll always be very grateful to Jay for bringing me into Gaia. That was a lot of Jay stuff right there. So, but I just wish Cliff High would say he didn't know something every now and then. That'd be great. All right. Hey, I think I'm going to get out of here tonight. I've been doing this for an hour and 24 minutes. I'm going to shut her down. That just startled me. I'm sorry. I apologize. Sometimes I get excited. What can I say? Jupiter Sag, first house. I'm going to get on out of here. Kair, don't be a stranger, man. Come back next Sunday night. I'll come check you out on Facebook and see what you're up to. I miss you, brother. And did we have the chart of the week? No, we're not going to do the chart of the week tonight because I just wanted to get into. I spent an hour 24 dealing with like the Bourdain stuff. So we're gonna jump out. But tomorrow I will be doing a special 15 minutes of flame. That will happen tomorrow only because of the Bourdain stuff. I'm going to jump back on just for tomorrow because I have to. Got to get in and just you know, sort of turn some stuff inside out. Take care, Pono KU, Tanya. Hey, there's Alexis. Thank you. Coach, I'll check you out on Facebook. Thanks for stopping by, Ra. Always a pleasure. Lovings and blessings to all of you as we awaken, our time of awakening here and now, out of this dream and out of this illusion. These are really profound and really powerful times, and we're in it together. And don't ever forget that, okay? Have a great night. I'll be back tomorrow for a special 15 Minutes of Flame. Good night.